Okay. So tonight's share is really a continuation of last week's share. So let's recap what we did last week. Last week we talked about, first of all, we saw that in the birth of Binyamin, we saw that there was two names. Rachel Imenu, as her literally her dying words are, she names her son Ben Oni, and then Yaakov, it seems like he corrects her and says, no, his name should be Ben Oni, should be Binyamin. And Rav Hirsch said that essentially this conversation was that she was looking at her struggle. She was obviously going through the struggle of struggles, giving birth to this precious child, but her life is taken as a result. And she kind of names him the son of my struggle. Why don't we pass him also? And Yaakov says, hold on a second, there's a struggle going on here, but this can be Benjamin, this can be the source of our yamin, of our strength. So Rav Hirsch points out that could be perhaps the whole discussion is about how do we view suffering, how do we view challenge? Do we view challenge as something, an obstacle? Do we view challenge as something, of course, an obstacle, but also, in addition, something we can grow from. Okay? Then we saw the Rambam. We talked about the Rambam, who basically said that a Jew's responsibility to facing a tragedy, a crisis, is to basically say, how can we learn from this? How can we do tshuva? It's Darchei tshuva to do hazaka, tariu, and basically not to just say life should go on as is. A Jew's responsibility when something happens in the world is to say, how can I grow from this, and also how can I really daven the Kadosh Baruch Hu to stop the tzar. We have to daven that Hashem should stop the tzar. Fine. And we saw machlokas Ramban about tefillah. But we said even the Ramban, who says that tefillah maybe in general is not d'oraisa, we said even he would agree that tefillah in Eis Tzara is definitely mid d'oraisa, and that is essential for us to daven during Eis Tzara. Fine. Then we shifted our focus. I said that, in all my life I've never really read Kol Dodido Fake straight. Maybe I read the English. I don't think I ever read the Hebrew to learn it straight. And I felt like it was time to go back to Kol Dodido Fake. And we started reading Kol Dodido Fake. And in that, the Rav that we discussed, we started last week, is basically dealing with the question of why is there suffering in this world? Why do the righteous suffer? We didn't see the source inside. We can start with that source tonight. It's a Gemara in Brachos. It's source number 11 on your printout. It's page 2, the bottom, page 2. And the Gemara in Brachos says as follows: it's good to learn a Gemara. We should see a Gemara inside. The Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Yossi, Shlosha Dvar Mikesh Moshe Mlifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe Rabbeinu asked 3 things of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'nasan and HaKadosh Baruch Hu acquiesced those 3 things. Mikesh Tishra Shechina Al Yisrael, he asked that the Shechina should be present on the Jewish people, but not Hashem said, sure. Bikesh, I'm just summarizing without the proofs. Okay, Bikesh Lo Tishra Shechina Al Umot Olam. He requested that the Shechina should not rest on the non-Jews of the world, but not Hashem said, yes, I'll make a distinction between you and the non-Jews. Yeah. Third line in bold, source 11. He says he wants to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how do you work? How does your world make any sense? And Hashem said, sure. And what's the proof pasuk? This is after the ego. Moshe Rabbeinu goes to Shemaim and he basically says, I want to know your ways. I want to understand the mysteries of creation. Amr Lefana, what was he getting at? So the Chazal say, what was Moshe really asking? Ribbon Sha'olam, why are the righteous people who have bad things happen to them? And why are the righteous people and why are the righteous people who have good things happen to them? Yesh Rasha v'Tovlo, Yesh Rasha v'Ralo. So the Gemara questions the whole assumption. And the first volley in the Gemara's discussion is Amr Lo Moshe Tzadik v'Tovlo Tzadik ben Tzadik. The first answer is very interesting, by the way. The Gemara's answer is, well, it depends. Are you a tzaddik ben tzaddik? Meaning within righteousness, you have to know, are you righteous? Are you the son of a righteous person? And we kind of take into fact the whole family tree. But then the Gemara says, wait a second, we have other psukim that say, banim lo yumsu avos abanim. We have this concept that you aren't reward or punishment for your parents' ledger. And the end, the Gemara concludes with that day. Well, it depends. Do you perpetuate whatever your parents did, or did you deviate from your parents did? They did one thing, you did a different thing. So if your parents are in Russia, you're a tzaddik, then you've left whatever they're doing. So it's not going to be on your ledger. So it kind of depends. If you continue to perpetuate what your parents did, l'tov, that's great. If you perpetuate l'ra, then that's a problem. But if you change, if they were ra and you are tov, so then you don't. Then the Gemara says you don't have to worry about their ledger. Fine. But that's all within the opinion. So I want to draw this point. I never saw this Gemara clearly. All of this famous Gemara that Moshe said, Hashem, tell me your ways. So one day it says, Hashem said, yes, let me tell you. And he gives this whole mathematical equation. Well, you need to analyze who are you and who are your parents. There's another day in the Gemara that says, Pli the Reb Meir. Reb Meir felt totally different. Reb Meir, Shtayim not nulo. Two things Moshe asked of Hashem, and Hashem said yes. V'acha lo not nulo. And the second was Hashem said, no, I'm not going to give in to what you're saying. Shenamar v'chanoti et asher achon. This is the question of theodicy. Why do bad things happen to good people, or why do good things happen to bad people? And the second opinion in the Gemara and the Talmud is, you aren't capable of knowing. I do grace to people who are not good people, and I give mercy to whoever I want, even if they aren't deserving. And he brings a proof pasuk, lo tuchal et panai. You're not able to see my face. The Gemara is Darchei according to Reb Meir, basically saying you cannot understand the mysteries of creation. Okay? I think it's important just to start when we talk about asking these questions. We're gonna, well, I'll review about what we saw in Rav Salvation last week, but it's important to note that I think the more conventional approach that always resonates with me, and I think most people say, is that we don't really understand anything, and that's really the second day. There is some first day which tries to give all these calculations, but there is a second approach, which is we don't understand anything. But the Rav starts Kol Dolido Fake, basically saying that this question has been gnawing at man from time immemorial. Moshe Rabbeinu asked the question to Kadosh Baruch Hu, why do righteous stuff? And so the Rav, basically, to address this question, deals with like everything the Rav does is a dialectic. You have to, analyze it tzvei dinim. More not dialectic, but it's actually tzvei dinim. They're two different prototypes of principles or prototypes of how man can view themselves. And he goes on to say that develop this idea we call man of fate and man of destiny. And the Rav, this part we read last week, so I'm just summarizing. He basically says that man of fate is where a person goes through life and he's acted upon. Everything that happens, he's an object. He has no free will. He has no ability to fight back. He's no ability really to question. He is just a puppet and the puppeteer's master plan, and everything comes to him as is. That is what's called man of fate. Man of fate is the one who often asks the question of why. He asks these what the Rav calls a speculative, almost philosophical question, saying, why? Why do you do these things to me? Because he feels totally random. He feels the chaos of God acting upon him. So he's like, why me? Why are you doing this? Well, the Rav says there's another typology of man, and that's not man of fate, but that's man of destiny. What is man of destiny? So the Rav described man of destiny is not an actor who's acted upon, but he is an actor who is taking a lead role in the script. He's not just an object, he's a subject. And man of destiny is trying to figure out his mission. And the question that man of destiny asks, or woman of destiny, I'm not trying to just about men, but the man of destiny is asking the question not of why, but for what. So this idea of for what is, we'll see in the Rav's writings, but I think it's most kind of like often quoted as an idea from Rav Hirsch, Rav Shamshin Rafa Hirsch, on the pasuk in Tehillim. We're shifting from a Tehillim series of Keli Lama Azavtani. So Rav Hirsch translate, what does it mean, God, why did you forsake me? Which is the question that we always think of, that man of fate is asking, why did you abandon me? Man of destiny is not saying, why did you abandon me? The question he's asking is lima. How do you put the vowelization? The vowelization, not lama. It's not why did you abandon me? A Jew is supposed to be a person of destiny, that we're part of some sort of cosmic plan, and that we're partners in that cosmic plan. We're supposed to ask lima, for what? And this idea that's really, Rav Hirsch says it explicitly in his Perush on Tehillim, that is what the Rav in Kol Dolido Fake basically says. Okay? Let's see if I can find some of the key lines that stand out from this. If you turn in your packet, if you did a lot of this last week, if you turn to, let's say, page 7. So there on page 7, in your packet, so the Rav on the left side of the page, quotes a beautiful Mishnah Mishnah Avo says, against your will you are born, against your will you die, but by your free will do you live. Right? This is the idea that the neshama is created against our will, and we're going to die against our will. But the question is, how do we live our lives? And a few lines later, he basically says, on the left side of the page, on page 7, according to Judaism, man's mission in this world is to turn fate into destiny. Whenever something happens to us or in this world, we're not supposed to ask why. We're supposed to ask for what. Because in for what, we are trying to be forward thinking. We're trying to think, what do I do with whatever happens to me and elevates. So look on the right side of that page 7. There are 2 arrows there. One, he says, evil mocks the prisoner of fate and his fantasy of a reality that is all good and pleasant. The man of fate and destiny recognize there's evil, but to the man of fate, evil mocks him because there's just chance in the world and nothing makes any sense, and there's nothing you can do with it. In the bottom of that paragraph on the right side, he says, when it comes to the man of destiny, says, I am, however, the second arrow there on the right says, I am, however, interested in it from a halachic point of view. As a person who wants to know what action to take, I ask a single question: what should the sufferer do to live with his suffering? In this dimension, the emphasis is removed from casual and teleological considerations and is directed to the realm of action. The problem is now formulated in the language of a simple halacha and revolves around a quotidian task. The question, turn the page, of questions is, what does suffering obligate man to do? So very powerful. The Rav is saying, not why does the bad thing happen, but what does it obligate me to do with it? And he says, basically, this problem is essential to Judaism. Halacha is just beautifully. He says, halacha is just interested in this question as in issues of Isser and Heter, Chiyav and Patur. We do not wonder about the ineffable ways of the Holy One, but instead ponder the path man must take when evil leaps at him. We ask not about the reason for evil and its purpose, but rather about its rectification, uplifting. How should a man react in a time of distress? What should a person do as not to rot in his affliction? Okay, so I think it's actually even more clear in the next paragraph. It says the halachic answer to this question is very simple. Suffering comes to elevate man. The Rav's assumption here, Chevra, is that life is not meant to be a party, and that life is not meant, doesn't give away freebies. Right? We all like freebies. We all like free swag.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Yes.
Right? So the Rav is basically on the premise that Jewish hashkafa is life is never meant to be a walk in the park. The idea of eat, drink, be merry, that's not the Torah view of life. So he says suffering comes to elevate man, to purify his spirit and sanctify him, to cleanse his mind and purity from the chaff of superficiality and the dross of crudeness, to sensitize his soul and expand his horizons. In general, the purpose of suffering is to repair the imperfection of man's persona. Halacha teaches that an afflicted person commits a criminal act if he allows his pain to go for naught, to remain without meaning or purpose. Suffering appears in the world in order to contribute something to man, in order to atone for him, in order to redeem him from moral impurity, from crudeness and lowliness of spirit. The sufferer must arise, therefore, purified, refined, and cleansed. Okay, so you can keep reading this if this speaks to you, but it's basically saying that we are, when we are living with a Torah hashkafa, so we are basically prompted, and we are basically demanded by life to ask, what am I going to do with it? We're not asking questions now, we're asking, well, what am I going to do with it? And in making that shift, we have the ability to grab the reins of life. Now, that's what the Rav says. I just want to make a caveat, very important to say this, doesn't mean it's easy, right? Suffering and heaviness and loss and pain is all very real. So what the Rav is saying sounds very nice, but I just want to say, for all those who experience suffering, it's hard. And it's hard, and it's a life journey of trying to figure out, well, what do we do with this, and how do we become elevated from anything that happens to us? But that's our question. So how do we take this and become an even more refined human being? Okay, I want to pause though as we finish chapter 1 of Kol Dur Fake. I want to just pause and take any comments or thoughts until now. This is all really a recap of last week's year. Any thoughts? Yeah, Rabbi Mike.
Rabbi, I would say Rabbi Howard Krishna, when he read his very famous book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. So he said something I thought was reason for suffering, that God's love is within the suffering. It's love and compassion is always within the suffering. It's within all the doctors, nurses, the CNAs.
The compassion we show.
Compassion, right.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay. Absolutely. And then some. We're gonna try to develop even more, but absolutely. Yeah. Harold.
I'm going to point out that what the Rav is saying does not apply for every circumstance, does not apply for every person with every individual's experience of psychopathology or pain. This applies for people who have a certain kernel of hope, a certain kernel of self, a certain kernel of intact being. But for people who are lacking even that, and there are such people, this can't work. You don't have anything to grasp onto. And he was talking about the quotidian halacha, workaday halacha. Okay, good. If that's enough for you, great. You can just latch onto halacha. What do I have to do now? What do I have to do now? What do I have to do now? If that's okay, that's okay. But not everybody's able to do that. So I just want to point out this is not a prescription for everybody.
Yeah, I want to better understand what you're saying. Are you saying for someone who is A, not Jewish, B,
No.
not religious? I mean,
I'm saying for someone who has such a degree of distress or injury in his psychology that he cannot muster the self-determination to do even this.
I think it's a very real, true thought. Thank you for phrasing. Absolutely. We're going to see in Rav Lichtenstein, what was that? When we see Rav Lichtenstein, he's going to talk about, let's say, we're going to talk about the Shoah. So he's going to talk about the heroism of those who could continue to latch onto whatever mitzvot they could. And of course, we all know that there were many who could not. So I think of course, the level of suffering is so deep that this might not work for everyone.
Right, you have to understand that what he's saying is not like the Torah saying. It's not like the Chumash saying it, where that has to apply to everybody in some way.
Right.
Here he's
I think it's aspirational. I think the halachic man would say this is aspirational. Harold's pointing out that sometimes it's just not always not doable, or maybe not doable today.
Right, for that moment.
Right. We also have to. I always tell people we're playing. We try to play the long game. Keeping halacha is not a zero-sum game. We play the long game. We're trying. We try to do our best, and we try to grow. Yeah. David or Shlomo Harris.
I was going to say what you said, which is aspirational, but also it's prescriptive, and maybe it is like the Chumash. In other words, this is what one is supposed to do, and but we don't play God either, and so it's like someone doesn't keep a mitzvah, it's not up to us. God will decide, why, where, when that person maybe failed or didn't fail, and not keep the mitzvah. This is Rose philosophy in life. This is what every person is always supposed to do as a general rule.
Right.
If someone fails, it's not for anyone to judge them.
Right. I teach this a lot when I teach like Hasanim and Kalas, but halacha taras mishpacha, but it's really for all halacha. It is you try your best, right? This is aspirational, and you try your best, and you don't. That's often when I'm teaching strict halacha to people, but I'm saying you're teaching any bar mitzvah boy. I should really set them down, say the same thing. You're gonna try your best, and sometimes you're gonna miss the mark, and you'll keep going. You'll try and keep working at yourself, right? So you would agree that it's aspirational.
I agree completely.
Okay. So this is the Rav chapter 1 of Kol Dovdi Dofek. I want to now transition because kind of how I framed last week's class was within the Rav's first chapter. He also talks about the idea that often when we face a big obstacle, we don't have our rational brain working when we first experience trauma or a crisis. And it's only after some time that the intellectual questions start to come into our minds. So I was kind of saying that we're already 2 months removed, or whatever it is, from October 7th, maybe that people are starting to ask these questions, and maybe they're not. And I'm not trying to plant questions in your mind if you're not bothered by these questions, but I know that as a thinking Jew, these are things that I'm always thinking about. Where was God October 7th? And there are many different answers, but we can frame where was God in lots of unfortunate bad things, because we have a terrible track record of bad things that have happened to Jewish people, unfortunately. So there was a beautiful article, and again, I'm sharing with you just to learn and to grow. I'm not, but some of our greatest thinkers have grappled with these questions. So I want to share with you some learning I've been doing. And this is an article I came across by Rav Lichtenstein. And Rav Lichtenstein was dealing with the Shoah. He was dealing with the Holocaust. Where was God during the Holocaust? Okay, so that's a question I'm sure many people have thought of. And I think from Rav Lichtenstein's article, we can develop another get chizuk in our current situation. Okay, so he basically, I'm just going to summarize. It's in English, so if you want to, you can read this whole article on your own. I don't want to spend the whole time reading an article; it's going to be boring for you. He basically says there are three approaches to the where was God during the Holocaust. One approach he summarizes on page 10. He says is that basically God did it because we were bad and deserving of some sort of tikkun, because European Jewry was checked out and we needed a wake-up call. That's approach number one, which he basically says is terribly damning on the Jews of Shoah. In addition to the fact there were many really great tzaddikim there, and kind of preposterous to think that's why something so calamitous happened. Number two is that Hashem gives the man free choice, and that God is kavayachol unable to interfere. And basically is that once there is free will, and there's evil in the world because there's free will, because evil has to be a foil character for good. So once there's powers of distinction to kind of the good get wiped out with the bad. He doesn't like this approach also because he says that implies that God creates kind of an enemy that he can't now intervene if he wanted to, like his arms are tied. He doesn't like that. The third approach, he says, is what we call Hester Panim, which is that there's basically times in life where HaKadosh Baruch Hu withdraws from this world. And it's not that he's always withdrawn. The hope is that God is going to be more present in this world, but there are times of Hester Panim, where which is basically where God is hidden, and he says, and that's why the Nazis and Hitler were able to give free rein to their desires. And then he says, this is I'm on page 10. Then he says, and I think it's very important for, as a rabbi, I need to share this Torah with you guys, but I think it's very important to hear this. He says, however, maybe in the bottom right paragraph 163 there, he says, however, it may be preferable to leave the problem unresolved, even if it's multiplied 6 million times, than to accept any of these answers. Not because there are better ones. There are not. Any of these answers may theoretically be correct. We should not reject, and then he goes on to say, we should not reject the answer that maintains we suffer because of our sins, because who are we to instruct divine providence? How do we punish? And he kind of goes on to say that it's not our position to point fingers at that generation. And turning the page to
just a quick note.
Yeah.
For A, I don't think he necessarily says it was sins that we committed in Europe, in the
pre-30s, right?
It could have been something from centuries, a long time ago, and now is the time to.
Right. But he's saying he rejects that. He says we shouldn't be finger pointing in history. I want to skip down to look at page 11 and page 164. There, the Rav basically says, in the fourth paragraph, he says, for those of us who are believers, and by the way, Harold, you could also say, well, not everyone's a believer also, which is a whole other realm of person. But for those of us who are believers, it's preferable to live with the question and with the faith surrounding it rather than try and grasp at explanations of one kind or another. We cannot, nor will we ever be able to provide an adequate explanation for what happened. Someone once said in response to a question as to whether he believed an explanation would ever be found for the Holocaust. And the response was, I hope not. A woman once asked my neighbor, Leib Rachman, a Holocaust survivor, where was God during the Holocaust? He replied, he was with us. That's the only response. I am with him in distress. The question remains, we are unable to supply explanation for even smaller details of history's course because we cannot see the entire picture, how much greater that is our inability to explain an event of this magnitude. We are not judged by our ability to find or create convoluted explanations. Our test lies in not forgetting and in learning lessons for the future. So Rav Lichtenstein, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of the Gush Etzion, who was also a former Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva University, he was the Rosh Kollel before Rav Rosenzweig and Rav Schechter were the Rosh Kollel of the afternoon Seder Kol in Rietz. So Rav Lichtenstein followed his Rebbe, which is his father-in-law. Basically, the way we handle these big questions are, we don't try to give explanations. The Rav felt any type of answer to the Holocaust is inappropriate and out of line and should never be attempted. It's not our question. Our question is not why, our question is for what. But the difference between Rav Lichtenstein and the Rav is that Rav Lichtenstein gives now 6 eitzas, 6 advices of what he thinks we could grow from the question. And I think they spoke to me as things that we can all lean into today. So first, the first one he says that we need to remember what happened. And now I want to, there's the Shoah and there's also October 7th. So he's talking about the Shoah, but I think we can draw from our own lives and our own experiences. So he says, first, we're obligated to remember. The remembrance is twofold. He talks about the idea that the Gemara and the rabbi teach the idea of a zecher l'mikdash. We do certain things as a remembrance of what was in the Mikdash. So he says, at the top of the next page, that basically we have to be doing things to remember the loss. So what are things in our own lives that are kind of like reminders that we're doing that help us kind of have top of mind of what happened October 7th? Someone give me examples? Reading the news might be. I read Times of Israel way more than I used to. I mean, I always did a lot, but now I do a lot more. What else?
We're going to think about it on Tisha B'Av.
I think Tisha is going to be a heavy day this year because it'll be a lot to have to good. Saying the Tehillim. I think doing something different for me every time I get the chance to say Tehillim, it's a little bit of a reminder. It's like, oh yeah, things aren't like they were October 6th, right? We're doing something different. That's something that should say a little bit of a pinch of like the world's not the same world post October 7th. So the one he says that we could do things to remember. Number two, and I want to like see them without boring, just reading an article. Number two is we have to strive for a higher level of love for our fellow Jews, not on the basis of the communal fate of the past, but on the basis of our destiny, our common future, which I think is very true now. The sense of achdus, the sense of like every Jew, no matter how, I find this actually very warm. Literally the most irreligious Jews right now, the most Jews who like barely know anything, they don't know the aleph beis, they are feeling the heat of anti-Semitism now. They are questioning if they had a mezuzah, do we want to have a mezuzah? I don't want to say like I'm happy that we're having the same experience, because I wish I would never want them to have this experience, but I find it very uniting that literally every Jew is experiencing some form of being shaken up, of like, I don't know, the news every day is spending a lot of time talking about Jews. Like literally every time I open the news, it's anti-Semitism. That's what it seems like everyone's talking about, and that's, I don't know. That to me, it's I don't know. It's saying something. I don't know what. I'm not sure, but it's definitely speaking to me. Okay. 3, and I want to hear your thoughts also. Does anyone have any thoughts on that, by the way? Just the achdus? Not yet. Okay.
I agree with that it still takes time for people who have no concept of affirming or accepting our history to start to turn their heads around and think maybe there is a unity of the people that transcends their quotidian beliefs, their parochial way of looking at things.
That's interesting. You don't think that the world of Jewry is like thinking about Achdut right now?
Maybe thinking, but not yet in it, not yet accepting it, have not yet changed. Maybe is being forced to think.
Right. I'll give you a chizuk. This Yechiel Levine, this family who's living in Maryland last month. So I went to say goodbye to them 2 days ago. As your representative, I went to wish them off before their flight, and he said to me that he never felt achdus of Klal Yisrael until this month. Okay. Which he's from family. They're Israeli, so like definitely. But he did say that something is but he's dati, so maybe he has a different framework.
I'm also reading the Israeli English papers, news, and I'm reading all kinds of stories about how the or lack thereof. There's plenty of achdus in some respects.
In Israel or in America?
Yeah.
In Israel, from the people who firmly reject the authenticity of our history, who firmly reject the legitimacy of Torah, who firmly reject having any more than a casual relationship to some remote God. There are lots of people like that.
Right. I think I want to just push back a little bit. I think I'm not in Israel, so I don't have the exact pulse. But my sense is, and this Rav pointed out to a bunch of Rabbanim this week, that those who are serving in the army is definitely a sense of like whatever they're fighting about judicial reform is no longer being fought. We are brothers and sisters in arms. right? But literally, like on the battlefront, there's no distinction, and this is a sharp point. But a Rav pointed out that we're going to start reading this week's parsha. We're going to start reading about the pirud of the brothers, the separation of the brothers, and how do the brothers ultimately, let me think what the Ara was. How do the brothers ultimately come back together? Is when Yehuda, ultimately, now we're skipping after a few parshos, by Yigash already a few parshos, but he's going to be willing to risk his life for the other brothers. Once another brother is willing to risk his life, that's when the brothers and the friction and disparity actually is repaired once a brother is willing to sacrifice for other brothers.
The break happened, when they were ready to kill another brother.
Sure.
That's throwing him into the pit.
Right. I'm just saying, I do think that, I'm not there in person, but I do think that the fact that we're fighting as one, it brings people together.
I mean, I think that when, you're like driving around now, you're like, yeah, Jewish people still there.
Right. Absolutely.
I've
I'm on Second Street, so I don't feel as I'm not doing anything as bold, but
I've had friends that are distant friends that I haven't talked to in a long time that have reached out because they're Jewish and they've reached out. Like I was like their more observant Jewish friend in other circles.
So they're bagling you, whatever the term
so
is.
they like wanted to connect with me because of that identity that we both have, and they took that opportunity. And I don't know if it's just me, but I've heard from some other friends, it's been similar, that like in the workplace with non-Jewish people, just another day at work, and hey David, how's your weekend? And just no real acknowledgement of what's been going on, which I'm not judging in any way. I'm just saying I've noticed that it's Jewish people, religious or not, that are in touch, and then non-Jewish people that are not. And there is that connection. So whether you want to call it unity, achdus, or what, something else that's driving it, it's been noticeable. I don't know if others have experienced that too.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Okay, so let's keep seeing. So he says in number 3, he says we have to learn from poverty and suffering in the past how truly fortunate we are in the sense of who is wealthy, who is satisfied with his lot. Goes on to say that basically everything is put in perspective. When you see the calamity, you see the mothers grieving and the families broken of the hostages, so then you it's hard to complain about the hanging up of our regular lives. I think that's a very important point. Number 4, moreover, we have to learn humility when it comes to historical commentary. Someone who cannot provide an answer for what took place during the Holocaust should not be overly eager to provide explanations for current events, right? We should be humble. Don't say you understand why things happen because we don't understand. Number 5, one of the messages of the Holocaust, paradoxically might seem, is that of faith. If a person experiences a period of intense difficulty, his faith wavers as a result of his troubles. He has to remember those Jews who lived through the inferno and persevere with perfect pure faith. People in the midst of the hideous events which they experienced continued to believe and persisted in the scrupulous observance of mitzvahs. A person has to remember that each of us is capable of being an Am Ravinu. Someone believes even if he is alone in his belief. This is fascinating. Listen to this. I don't know who this person is, but Emil Fackenheim once said that to be a believing Jew means to be the last Jew on earth and still to believe. Dr. Zerach Barhaftig recounted how when he discovered Rabbi Chil Yaakov Weinberg, the author of the Sridei Eish, at the end of the war, the latter asked him, are there any other Jews left in the world? He had believed that he was the last, but nevertheless remained a Torah giant firm in his faith. You think of the great Posek Gaon, the Sridei Eish, who wrote a lot of famous chuvos. So if, that he felt that maybe he's the last Jew in the world, so he has to be the last Jew in the world in case you need one Jew left. I don't know if anyone saw, but Eisenman in Passaic wrote like a beautiful journal that he was journaling during the rally, and he said that he came like in his frock and his rabbinic garb. So a lot of people at the rally were coming over to him and asking for brachos, and like the Jews had not seen a Jew like him, like of his stature and his regal. He said they were like, wow, there's Jews like you still left in 2023. And he was saying it kind of like felt like he was a museum piece. He was kind of like he felt like he's that last Jew left in the world. So again, we have to take on that achrayus. So like maybe we might be that last Jew. So we have to hold on to our faith. And I think also to look at those who emerge from difficult things with their faith, we have to draw strength from those people as well. So I think we all have examples in our lives of people who were who've gone through really difficult things, they can be role models to us. And the last one I think is the most important for us, and I really want to bring this home to you guys, is finally, we must be animated by a sense of mission, a feeling of duty towards Hashem, as well as towards those who sacrifice their lives. Those of us who remain on the battlefield after the great decimation of God's forces have to gird ourselves, take up their vision, and carry it forward. The same responsibility that they carried is now the lot of a much smaller community, and we therefore have to make much more of an effort. In the past, the person who built himself up was free to consider only himself, his own personal interests. In our generation, we have to see ourselves part of Knesset Israel, continuing in the path laid down by our fathers, lifting the baton that was struck from their hands. We are all, in a sense, survivors. So, and then he says in the next paragraph, he says, a survivor was once asked after the Holocaust, "You're still a Jew?" He immediately replied, "What else? Should I then become a Gentile?" Let us not become entangled in meaningless questions of how they allow themselves to be led like sheep to the slaughter. What seemed heroism was demonstrated there. Jews saying on the way to the crematoria, "Joyful are we, how good is our portion, how pleasing our lot." And it was not only the pious and righteous who proclaimed this. So I think what Rav Lichtenstein is saying is very apropos today, that we have to have a sense of mission. We have to have a sense of, there are less Jews, and we definitely feel under attack, under siege. I'm sure those who saw the university presidents yesterday in their interview in Congress, like saying that you can just say call for genocide and intifada and like your free speech, you're good. I think it's a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call that we as Jews have to stand up for what we believe in and not to cower away, and to be proud in who we are, and to learn more about who we are. And then finally, number 7, then I want to hear any thoughts that you have from these kind of action items that Lichtenstein lays down for us, is very, very powerful formulation. In addition to devoting rededicated efforts to Knesset Israel and Torah, so let's also take on the task they never had the opportunity to accomplish. He's talking about the Shoah. He says, what do they not have to accomplish? After that, building and developing the land of Israel. Anyone who emerges from the Yad Vashem experiences profound depression, and quite understandably so. When you emerge and see the hills of Judea and Jerusalem rebuilt, you can take some comfort. We should not attempt to do an accounting and say that this is God's compensation to us for the Holocaust. The state of Israel, very powerful, listen to this. The state of Israel is not the solution to that problem, but rather an opportunity for us to fulfill our mission. It's not an answer, but rather a challenge and a destiny, and our responsibility is to work towards its realization. Okay, so he's also telling us that in terms of that mission focus, it's not just in terms of our own individual mission, which is to be a kinder person, to be an Eved Hashem, to be more lishma, to learn more, to help do chesed. He's saying also with regards to Eretz Yisrael, we have to feel more, it's time to step up, do whatever we can. I think on 1840, David Beshevkin, my friend, frames it as no one wants to be the generation that had Israel and lost it. Maybe it's the first time in our lives, and maybe not for the previous generation, but in our lives, the first time where it feels that the state of Israel is in a precarious place, where it's not a given, and let's say in the world of public opinion, certainly, that Israel will always be there, and we need to do whatever we can to try to support and be all in terms of supporting Israel. Anyway, those were the seven points that Rav Lichtenstein shared. I thought it was worth sharing. Any thoughts or reflections on Rav Lichtenstein's article? Anything stand out that we not have expected?
Some thoughts that came to mind when you're saying this. I think I know this from a Matzah song, but I think it's like that during Mashiach, Israel will become Yerushalayim, and the whole world will become like Israel. And that's kind of like how I've been feeling. Where like it feels like I'm in Eretz Israel. It feels like I'm in the country.
Even here.
Not all the time. And more like here and there now, but definitely at the beginning, it really felt like I was in that country. I think it was Reunion who said that like Israel is not only our spiritual right, but it was our. He said like it's my country. I feel it. And that really spoke to me. It's like
Beautiful.
I feel like I'm there.
Beautiful.
That to me is like a messianic.
Preaches of Gedar, right? Like all the borders and like you're in it. It's powerful. Yeah. I'm not sure who said this, but someone said that they thought that there's a mikvah of water, there's a mikvah of holy spaces. Maybe it was revised, but I don't know. Someone said they felt that being amongst 300,000 Jews, it was like being in a mikvah of Jews. It was like just a tara, a process of like we're in it together. And it felt kedusha, it felt elevated. Probably was on 1840. I feel like it was someone studying. Anyway, that's a beautiful thought. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, right, Mike.
So I wanted to bring a lot of hope to us, and it's really true what David was saying, that the Jewish people, we feel blessed the most and the most sensitive to it, but the Jewish thing is so beautiful, feeling like being in Eretz Israel, that so many of my non-Jewish wonderful friends and family were able to learn this relationship with an Irish crossing on fast. And she said, Rabbi, I want you to know that I'm so incredibly sorry about what has happened.
Beautiful.
So I was so incredibly touched by her compassion and her beautiful kindness, and also the people that pick up my family's prayers and garbage, and they said, Rabbi, we're praying for your family. Everyone in Israel, God to work everything out for good.
Beautiful. Okay, can I just share one more thought, Mike? Okay, shkayach. So the last thought I want to share tonight is a piece by Rav Shagar. Okay, so I'm just going to warn you that Rav Shagar is a new age. He's not alive anymore. But he's like a more of a neo-Hasidic way of thought. But I've quoted him a lot recently because he speaks about modern questions with a more of a mystical, maybe a lot of it's based on Rabbi Nachman, but he deals in such a powerful, poignant, ruchani, spiritual way. So I want to share this Torah with you. It's when we talk about, why do bad things happen to, why do bad things happen to good people? When we talk about suffering, it's a dark, heavy topic. I don't want to leave on like okay, we read some articles, now we're good, we've got the classic answer. That's not why I'm doing this year. Because ultimately, I think part of our responsibility as Jews is to be able to hold on to two things. We're aware of evil, that's what the Rav said. We're aware of evil, we're not in denial of it. We're aware of difficulty, but we also need to find things that elevate. So I want to share with you a Torah that the Rav says, and then again, there are lots of Torahs that Rav Shagar. There are lots of Rav Shagar says that I think are relevant. This Torah I thought is actually very powerful, but you have to open up your neshamos. So for those rational thinkers out there, I'm going to ask you to try to lean into this idea because I think it's very important. When we have questions like philosophical questions of, where was God? Those questions can often lead us to a place they can debilitate us, where we can't feel ruchnius, or it's. I'm just saying for myself, it's hard when you're struggling with intellectual questions. Also, allow God into your existence, to feel God in your avoda, and that's very sad. That might be the saddest thing of all. If you can't feel God, or you don't feel spirituality, or you turn off spirituality, to me, that's a loss in your full exposure of what Judaism has to offer. So I want to share with you a thought that Rav Shagar had that for me, when I was learning about why is there suffering, it really resonated with me. It might not resonate with you, but if it resonates with one or two of you, it's worth it, even if it doesn't resonate with all. And it's based on Torah Rabbi Nachman. So Rabbi Nachman says the Torah, I have it as page 1314. There's also an article by Eli Wiesel. We can say that later. We read too much English. We gotta read some Hebrew. Hebrew, we have the idea of osios machimos. There's something in learning Hebrew letters and that has the ability to penetrate our hearts. So I want to learn something in Hebrew. So he says this in Hebrew. You with me? Yes. Page 13. He says, Nachmu Ami. Pasuk in Yeshaya, we're all familiar with comfort my nation. It says, this is Rabbi Nachman. This is a Torah from Rabbi Nachman. All tragedies and bad things and galut are only according to some sort of lack of knowledge. Uksheni hadat, when we have shleimut hadat, whatever that means, that we have full dat, then we'll have completed our chesronot, and it will be like imdat kanita machasarta. If a person, the Gemara says, if a person has das, they have full awareness, and you'll be lacking nothing. Uktiv lachen gala ami bibli dat. That in order to have exile, you have to be in a state of blidat, a state of lack of knowledge. Ikar achaim and nitzchim, the main essential life existent that is nitzchi, which is eternal. Yella asid machmas hadas. It will be in the future when the Mashiach and all the questions will be answered. Sheyirba das, and then we'll have lots of das, lots of. I don't have a good way of translating das except for knowledge, awareness, in understanding. It's a broad. It's broad.
It means understanding, means wisdom, means
Right.
everything that you can do with your mind.
Correct. So will be like living in his oneness. Then we'll be living eternal life like him. If only I knew, then I could be. That's the Torah Rabbi Nachman. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, one of the great, Hasidic thought, but more of based on Zohar as a mystical thinking. That's what Rabbi Nachman says. What does he mean? I'm not sure. But Rav Shagar tries to develop his ideas. So I want to share with you something that spoke to me in Rav Shagar. We're going to look at the next page in the middle of the paragraph where there's an arrow. He's talking about this idea of what is das. What is knowledge of anything? This is powerful. And we'll read it together. We'll try our best to figure it out. So hadas v'muvan zeh hi hashlama chashuva l'chachma. Das is the completion of wisdom. V'chachma keshelatzma yesh mashu me'aker u'minaker ve'em tzuta ani mitbonein tamid b'chutz. There's something, I'm not even sure if I understand all these words, but something which I'm thinking about which is external from me. V'shonem min hadat hamivtat hitchabrut v'itgalut hamavsharut litfos nekuda pnimit. Das seems to me that's not just I'm struggling with something external, but I'm trying to be in it to where I'm experiencing it. But this is not the part, or this is a part of the part, but we're getting to the main part. Hadati yediat hadavar ba'ofen mamashi mimifnim. Rav Shagar talks about this idea. Actually, he said it in the first paragraph above. He says that ultimately das, experience of God, he talks a lot about this, is something which is felt internally. So in the paragraph above, it's underlined. In the paragraph above, he says, Madrega shemashmuta hi yediyah chushit.
But mamashi, concrete,
Concrete.
internally, that seems to be a contradiction right there, but it's not. But
I think it's really mamashi means that you experience it internally. You
that's-
feel it.
But is that concrete? That's immaterial. It's not concrete. Like
It's
this.
something you feel.
Okay.
I mean, if your emotions are real, then it's mamashi.
Okay.
In the paragraph above, he says Madrega mashmuta yediyah chushit. It's yediyah which is felt, pnimit, it's internal, shanochachot elokit shebehoveh, that you live with a presence of the existence of God. V'lo yediyah sheba adam yodeh yediyah chitzonit lo. Rav Shagar says that basically yediyah Hashem, knowledge of God, is not supposed to be some sort of intellectual game. It's not supposed to be some sort of exercise of the mind. It's supposed to be living with the presence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, feeling God's presence, and that feeling of God's presence is pnimit, it's inside of you, and that is very informative. Now I'll go back to the paragraph below. He says, "Kasher adam yodeh et Hashem b'darga zu." When a person knows Hashem at this level, where he experiences a Kadosh Baruch Hu, hu nichla be'echad, he's living within oneness. V'az mitbatlim chesronotav hu nichlal b'chaim anitzchim. At that point, he's kind of forgotten whatever lackings he has or lackings exist in the world. He's just living an eternal life. Drusha Kabbalat Atzmit. This is powerful. We're all trying to figure out how to experience spirituality and ruchnius in today's world, because modern man it's hard. So he says, in order to allow for real Kabbalas Malchus Shemaim to feel the presence of Hashem on us, we Drusha Kabbalat Atzmit. We have to actually have radical acceptance of ourselves. Tinu'ah Sheli L'Havanat Atzmit. We need to have a better sense of awareness of my own inner world. Vihish tachrurut mimasha kafar lamahut. I need to free myself from the shackles of what is holding me back externally. Hagorem lachatz mauka, which is causing me pressure and causing me to bend and be kind of in a pretzel. Inyana shel dat. What is that? V'yecholto shel adam la'agil la'achdut im atzmo. Das is not just on a sichli level of how do we understand intellectually why do bad things happen to good people? He's saying there's nothing to do with it. Das is the ability for a person to reach a oneness with himself, with his experiences. If you're truly comfortable with yourself on a deep soul level, that I'm comfortable with who I am, I'm comfortable with I'm in a good place. I'm at peace, let's call it, with my life. Then you're nichlal. You're living amongst an experience with called Ein Sofit, of where God is expansiveness. When a person can connect to their place, it doesn't have to matter where you are or whatever part of yourself you're connected to. It's fascinating. Is when a person is actually in touch with their real, true, authentic self, they're actually tasting redemption. And if you believe that you have a chelek el kaima, there's a part of a God in you, when you connect to parts of yourself, you're connecting to parts of your godly self. Even if it looks like from the external, like you're not learning, you're not davening, you're not doing anything spiritual, he says, that's the fact you connect with your true, authentic self. That is a religious experience. That is a godly experience. This is all actually the Hakdama. If you thought you got what Rav Shigar is saying, he's just setting you up now. He's basically saying anything you're doing that connects to your authentic self is a connection to Ein Sofit, of godliness. The Shema Provoxia Omer Shemuvan Hazeh. I assume it means like a provocation in order to. I'm not sure what that word provoxia means, but okay. It says litim tofa shel chazara b'sheila. Here's his big idea. This I think is going to be this might blow your mind. It says sometimes tofa shel chazara b'sheila hi tahalich hazeha b'omko lechazara b'tshuva. It says sometimes we have to return to the state of asking questions to be able to actually return to the state of having answers. What does that mean? Say it again. Sometimes we have to return to a state of having questions to actually return to a state of having answers. Within the godliness, which is expansiveness, there's also kfira. Sometimes returning to having questions, it actually helps them find themselves once again. Which ultimately will propel a person to find the oneness in God. And from having questions, from struggling, from being authentically bothered with something, chazara bit she'ila can lead to chazara bit tshuva. Very powerful idea. And that encounter can help you knock yourself up from being a Jew by rote, and by being a Jew, which is just kind of doing the mechanical service of God. What does Rav Shagar say? Such a mind-bending idea. I think what Rav Shagar is saying, what I take out of Rav Shagar, and then I want to hear from you, I think Rav Shagar is saying is that basically, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is found in every part of our existence. It's Ein Sofi. So if we want to tap into God, we can tap into God by any part of our existence, but it has to be authentic, it has to be real. And sometimes when we're just living our monotonous lives, we're just stuck in the routine. We're actually not as close to God as we think we are because we're just going through the motions. Sometimes having questions that are bothering us, that are plaguing us, that are eating and gnawing at us, those questions reawaken our true authentic self. And through the reawakening of the true authentic self, it's actually a springboard to get closer to God.
Can I add one thing to that? Is that
please?
I think a lot of times, especially when you're blinding yourself with the craziness of your everyday routine, you're not even seeing the questions. Something's gnawing at you from inside. And if you don't take the time to get clarity on what those questions are, you're not even at that first step.
Wait, can you clarify? You're saying something you aren't even aware of the questions that are inside of you because everything is so monotonous.
You don't know what the questions are. You don't know that there are questions that you need to think about.
explains why we
Be-
always answer questions
be-
with questions.
because we're right. Curiosity is powerful. Curiosity it propels us to life.
And
But
it
I-
makes you engage.
it makes you engage. It re-engages you by having questions, even if they're directed at God. Even if they're questions like, "Why do bad things happen to good people?" Rav Shagar is saying that's healthy because the question will propel you closer to your authentic godly self. But yeah, I want to better understand your experience. It's important to me. So you're saying something we don't know the questions because we're not thinking, or because we're just we're in the shigrati, we're just in the routine, we're just going through the motions.
If you're, on your phone and scrolling and on Netflix or whatever it is that one does these days, I think it's very easy to not take the time to reflect on yourself and know who you are, Atzma, right? And just you're not going to get that clarity if you're not taking the time to think about it.
Right. Absolutely. Which I'm going to just build on what David's saying. I'm
I'm
not
guilty of
sure. What?
I'm guilty of this. I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, all of us.
So-
You watch Netflix?
No, but I think this is why I saw this Torah. I said this is so powerful because I feel that sometimes we beat ourselves up when we have questions. Why do you have questions? Holy Jew doesn't have questions. You're supposed to just accept, soldier up. I think that's the chinuch that we get when we're younger. I think Rav Shagar is saying the goal is to have authentic relation with Kadosh Baruch Hu. So you have an authentic relation with Kadosh Baruch Hu, so then if you have questions, and take those questions and do something with it. Go learn. Go to a shir. Ask your Rav. Discuss a real conversation at your Shabbos table. Whatever it is, but do something real and authentic. And by doing that authentic thing, you've now elevated the whole experience. You brought God back into your life. So I think what David's saying is why I brought this to us, is that ultimately I'm not here to be a philosopher. That's not my strength. But what I think, what I think for me, the challenge is when I have a big question, I'm wondering how can I have this big question? Does God exist, and why does God do bad things, or how does He allow bad things to happen? And I'm like, but I want it ruchnius, I want to taste kedusha, and I want to feel God. But those are a stira. Actually, God's saying it's not a stira. You can have questions, and the questions can actually propel you back to like a more authentic, real place of dvekus b'Hashem, which is like can be a very life-changing equation.
Look in particular what he says, how he gets into that point. He says,
Just want to warn those on the computer. It says my battery is low, so if the computer shuts off, I do apologize. Maybe I'll plug it in. Go ahead. Harold. Sorry. Yeah, you mind? Go ahead. Harold.
he says, just coming in the middle of the sentence, but that we're talking about the power of a person to gain a unity with himself, and then the im haviut chayav. That means the existence of his life, his very existence. In other words, we're talking about an aspect of the unity such that you know yourself.
Mhm.
You know yourself, and you also know your very being.
Right.
That's different than common self-awareness. Common self-awareness just means you just go along. You just know that yourself. You're doing your routines. You're just doing your stuff. You know who you are. You know that you've got a self there, and the self is there when you go to sleep, and it's there when you wake up. You know your hand is part of yourself, but not exactly yourself. And you know the table can come in contact with yourself because your hand can touch it, but it's not yourself. But what he's talking about, haviut chaya, he's talking about the being, your very existence. That is what connects you to God, because God is being itself.
Right. And I see in the words Reb Nachman said, "Ilu yidativ," by true knowledge, heyitiv. I could just be.
That's what we're talking
We've
about.
talked about this a little bit, right? If I could just, if I had radical acceptance of the self, I would be more comfortable just being.
But you got to know what the self is. You got to know that it's superposed with God's being itself.
Right.
That's the key.
Right. It's a radical acceptance of the self, which is godly imbued.
He's using that idea, but he's not explicitly developing that idea. But
Right.
that's at the foundation of what you're talking about.
Well, he's talking about. I just love learning it because it takes us to a different place. Rav Shagar kind of has it's a twist, right? He's saying the question. I'm going to say this. I don't mean to insult him. There are more people right now in this year than on a regular Parsha sheet. Why? Not because my regular parsha year is so bad or so good, because on a regular, when the world pre-October 7th is happening, it's not as much compelling. What compelled people to come to shir tonight? I don't know, but my guess is something post October 7th is there's something bothering you. There's something missing in your existence, and you're like, you know what? I'm gonna try going to a shir. That's what Rosh Hashanah is saying. You have a question. There's something real, whether you know it consciously or not. You came to this year because you're looking for something, and the hope is that you're going to find something which is going to help you quiet that thing that's gnawing at you.
Cope for the next week,
Yeah,
to handle
it's going to help you with the. And I think to me, this Torah is so important because it allows us to be able to tap into something ruchani, something spiritual, even with questions. It's saying the questions are not anti-spiritual, they're not anti-ruchani. The questions are questions. We don't have to always have answers, but the questions can lead us to a reawakening of the self, and the reawakening of the self, if you do good things with it, can lead us closer to Hakadosh Baruch Hu.
Questions make it spiritual.
Yeah.
You're doing it by rote. What's the point?
What's the point?
I mean, the only reason I'm not questioning is- Okay.
But even for those people, which plenty exist, I think they have questions, right? They just
No, I think we just did.
they gave up. I have a hard time. To me, it's like a hard time to think that someone would stop engaging. I think there's a dullness that's maybe like a laziness, atheist. Yeah,
Also disappointments.
right. It could just be like a
Tremendous, a crushing disappointment.
Right.
That's something that prevents you from following the Rav's prescriptions. He was not disappointed.
So now we're full circle. So the Rav gave us only one path, which is to ask for what, and Rav Shagar is basically saying even without halachic man, you still could find God without halakha, which is a really powerful idea.
I think the other commonality is that the Rav was saying also to live with the question. You don't ask why, which is what you can answer. You ask what for. Don't look back. You'll never know that. That's God's purview. Don't look forward. Both of them are saying, live life with the questions.
Right. Rav Shagar is also saying though that not just that the answers are inadequate. Rav Shagar is saying the questions give vitality to life.
Struggle.
The struggle, right? The questions lead to realness in our avodas Hashem, which is ultimately what we.
Put it another way, it's the journey, not just the destination.
Beautiful. Yeah. Okay, holy brothers and sisters. So we've done something today, right? Hopefully we tapped in something real. That's where we got you thinking, which is ultimately what it's about. Thinking about that's what led you here, and hopefully we'll continue to go on a path. Just as we wrap up tonight's share, I find it interesting to read Kol Yidro Fakes. I haven't really learned it. So if this works for me, where I kind of weave in some Kol Yidro Fake with other Rav Shagar and other thinkers, that I'll kind of stick to this script for another week. Like the next paragraph, the next chapter is about Eov. Look, I've never learned Eov Keseder. Like it wasn't on my yeshiva curriculum. So if you're open to it, we can learn a little Eov next week. Or no, let's do Hanukkah related next week. Maybe we'll pick this up in 2 weeks. Well, maybe Hanukkah, we'll do Hanukkah stuff. Maccabees. I actually read it for the first time this week. Someone, I saw a source in it. I was like, no one reads this. As a rabbi, I should know what it says.
One or two.
I don't know. I
Is
saw
that
something.
the PJ Library book?
No. I'm gonna stop the recording. Be careful what I say. Okay, Chevra. Good to learn with you. Shkoyach, everyone. Okay.